Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El Rom.
And I'm Rebecca Rand.
In our top story, in yet another shocking display of their blatant anti-Israel agenda, the United Nations passed 6 resolutions condemning Israel and has officially declared that 2014 will be the International Year of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. Hillel Neuer, president of UN Watch, said, "We're concerned about a new year that will bring escalated politicalization of influential UN agencies worldwide, which will do nothing to help Palestinians or Israelis on the ground, but will inflict further damage to the world body's effectiveness and credibility." He said the UN's drumbeat of excessive, disproportionate, and one-sided condemnations of Israel causes polarization, threatens to push the parties further apart, and is counterproductive to the already fragile peace process.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and 5 ministers of the Israeli Knesset were hosted in the Vatican by Pope Francis last week. Francis, who has been Pope for less than a year, has made historical strides in repairing the relationship between the Vatican and Israel, as well as worldwide Catholicism and Judaism. He often speaks of Judaism as the big brother of Christianity. He has repented for the sin of anti-Semitism and has called on Christians to embrace their Jewish brothers and sisters. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu personally invited Pope Francis to visit him in Israel and gave him a Spanish translation of his father's book, The Origins of the Inquisition.
A member of the European Union Parliament has expressed his outrage that EU parliamentarians attended celebrations in Ramallah for the release of Palestinian terrorists. Fiorello Provera described the attendance by EU MPs at the celebration as unacceptable, and he went on to say that it undermined the EU's credibility as an honest broker. He stressed that the released terrorists are not freedom fighters and they are not heroes. They are assassins. In a related story, the French ambassador to Lebanon has been criticized for honoring members of the Hezbollah terrorist organization at a dinner reception. The European Union has designated Hezbollah as a terrorist organization and has outlawed contact with Hezbollah's military wing.
Last week, we reported on the plight of more than 1 million Jewish refugees who were forced to flee Arab countries. Many of these Jews were made to leave all of their worldly possessions behind in countries where they had thrived for hundreds of years. This week, the United States announced that it will return a cache of Jewish archives to Iraq rather than to its rightful owners. During the siege on Baghdad, U.S. soldiers discovered a treasure trove of Jewish documents in Saddam Hussein's headquarters. These articles were sent to Washington, where they underwent a $3 million restoration and are being displayed at the Washington National Archives. The Iraqi government claims that the documents are their property. However, Jews expelled from Iraq beg to differ. Edwin Shuker, who fled Iraq with his family in 1971, claims to have discovered his school certificate on display in Washington. He said, "This is more than a school certificate. It is the identity I was forced to leave behind, and I would like to be reassured that my children and future generations will have unrestricted access to this collection." An organization of Iraqi Jews in the United States is attempting to mobilize support from Congress to block the return of the articles to Baghdad, saying that the government of Iraq has no legitimate claim to the artifacts and that they should be returned to their rightful owners or their descendants.
A Palestinian businessman was snatched from his Ramallah office and detained by the Palestinian Authority for insulting President Mahmoud Abbas. Mohammed al-Sabawi, the director of an insurance group which employs hundreds of Palestinians, was arrested 2 weeks after he called for Abbas's removal from office due to the PA leader's illegal actions against the Palestinian people. A statement released by al-Sabawi's son said that heavily armed PA security forces arrived at our offices, claiming that my father had insulted a representative of the Palestinian Authority.
The Palestinian Authority has asked the Emir of Qatar for another $150 million. The PA admits that it cannot pay the salaries of over 170,000 civil servants and that the power plant in Gaza has been closed due to non-payment. The PA owes billions of shekels to the Israeli electric company, but rather than paying its outstanding bills, it uses international aid to pay Palestinian terrorists. We have reported extensively on the PA's misappropriation of over $3 billion in aid from the European Union and on the PA's policy of prioritizing the payment to terrorists over that of municipal employees. Despite the overwhelming evidence that the PA is using aid money to fund terrorism, the PA uses its debt as a propaganda tool. A Palestinian leader recently said, "We are facing these economic problems because of the Israeli occupation."
A 2-year-old girl was injured seriously in a terrorist attack in Jerusalem during the Hanukkah holiday. The child, Abigail Ben-Sion, was badly wounded when the car she was riding in was pelted with rocks by Palestinian terrorists. The toddler was rushed to Hadassah's Ein Kerem Hospital, where she was treated for a serious head wound. The Arab terrorists arrested were pictured laughing and gloating as they were escorted into the Jerusalem Magistrates Court for an arraignment hearing. Suspects said they committed the crime because they hate Jews. Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat arrived at the scene and said it's about time that we start treating a stone as a weapon. This attack comes just 1 week after a Palestinian couple was mistaken for Jews and nearly killed. Their car was stoned, and the young Arab family was almost lynched by Muslim terrorists. Only when the couple identified themselves in Arabic as Palestinians did the terrorists flee the scene.
Jewish worshippers visiting the Temple Mount during Hanukkah were violently attacked by Muslims. Israel allows the Muslim Waqf to control the mount, which is the holiest site in Judaism. The Waqf forbids non-Muslims to pray at the site and often restricts visitation by non-Muslims. During Hanukkah, a group of Jews ascended the mount and reportedly began singing Hanukkah songs. Several dozen Muslims began to riot and violently attacked the Jews. The Israeli Knesset is seeking a solution to the visitation issues on the Temple Mount and is attempting to create a fixed schedule by which Jews, Christians, and people of all faith may visit the holy place.
The Canadian Prime Minister was honored by Jewish organizations in Toronto last week. Stephen Harper has strengthened ties between Canada and Israel and has made history by refusing to lift sanctions against Iran. Israel is naming a visitor center in the Hula Valley after Harper. Plans for the center were officially revealed at an event called the Negev Dinner. More than 4,000 distinguished guests attended the festivities, sponsored by the Jewish National Fund, Karen Kayemet Israel. In his speech, Harper said that Israel will always be able to count on Canada's support, and he announced his plans to visit Jerusalem in the upcoming year. He added that Israel is a light of freedom and democracy in what is otherwise a region of darkness. One of the event's organizers said, "The State of Israel and the Israeli government will receive a warm and loving embrace from all of its friends and supporters in Canada, led by Harper, one of the most supportive leaders of the State of Israel."
Last week, the Israeli Air Force hosted the largest joint military exercise in Israel's history. More than 60 Greek, American, and Israeli fighter jets participated in the exercise, which was observed by diplomats, journalists, and cultural attachés from more than 20 nations around the world. Preparations for the drill have been in place for over a year, and during the past 6 months, the Israeli Air Force has conducted 2 training fights each day. An Israeli military official said that the Blue Flag exercise is facilitating an unprecedented level of information sharing between foreign nations, and that cooperation between the IAF and foreign armies is at an all-time high. He said that the Israeli Air Force has been practicing operations with foreign militaries for more than 3 decades, but only recently have we begun training together on a daily basis.
More than 1 million Jewish children have been killed by abortion in Israel since 1948. Israel is currently engaged in a demographic war for its very survival as a Jewish state. Imagine what a difference 1 million more Jews would have made for Israel. Friends of Efrat saves the lives of thousands of children every year by providing support to pregnant women in distress. Since 1977, Efrat has saved over 30,000 lives and is recognized as a world leader in preventing abortions. You can play a major role in Israel's survival now by helping us save Israel's unborn children.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here once again in a beautiful day in Jerusalem on our rooftop studio. My guest today is Hugh Kitson, CEO of Hatikva Film Trust. Hugh, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hugh, tell us a little bit about what is the Hatikva Film Trust?
Well, Hatikva Film Trust is a non-profit organization which we set up in England about 10 years ago, and we're actually also in the process of setting up a similar entity in the USA called Covenant of Hope Media.
One of your big hits that have just come out is The Forsaken Promise. Tell us a little bit about the film.
Well, The Forsaken Promise actually we did make a few years ago, but we've just had a premiere screening in Jerusalem with Hebrew subtitles on it. It's about the British Mandate. It's a little known period of history outside of Israel. A lot of Israelis, especially in the older generation, remember the British Mandate very well. And it's a very, very sad story. Britain issued the Balfour Declaration in 1917, November of 1917. And the screening took place actually on the 96th anniversary of that. And we pledged as a nation to assist the formation, or I should say really reformation, of a Jewish national home in Eretz Israel. And we reneged on that promise, which is really a very sad story. And as a result of us reneging on that promise, thousands, hundreds of thousands of Jewish people at least, who could have escaped the Nazi Holocaust and come home here to Eretz Israel, instead perished because Britain closed the gates of what was then called Palestine.
Oh, you're an evangelical living in Britain. You produce very informative documentaries. What's the mood like in Britain vis-a-vis Israel today?
Well, Josh, I'm afraid it's not a good scene in my view. When you go back to the 19th century, most Christians in Britain actually believed that one day Israel would be restored to her land, the Jewish people would come back. Why did they believe that? Because they read their Bibles, and more importantly, they believed their Bibles. These days, I'm afraid people, even in the church, take a somewhat different view, and we're seeing some of the traditional resurgent anti-Semitism in the church, which goes right back to the 2nd century AD, beginning to emerge again in the church in Britain. And of course this affects the whole land, in my view.
One of the big problems in England today is the rise of radical Islam. I mean, there's attacks all the time. It's being reported very briefly, but as I understand, it's a major problem. What is really happening there? How are people combating this radical Islamic attack and fear campaign among the citizens of London?
Well, by and large, I have to say the government are trying to play the whole thing down. In other words, ignore it. And I see this as a very big problem, really. I just want to say something that goes back to the mandate, and this is a very interesting fact. Right through the Bible, there is a spiritual law which cannot be broken, and that is what you sow, you reap. Well, right at the beginning of the mandate in 1920, the British government actually appointed Haj Amin al-Husseini as the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. And a lot of people know that he later sided with Hitler and wanted to bring the final solution to what was called the final solution of the Jewish problem here to the Middle East. But in appointing him as the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, it actually gave radical Islamic fundamentalism a foothold here in the land of Israel. Now, the Ottoman Turks have been ruling for 400 years, but it wasn't the radical Islam under the Caliphate in Constantinople, as it was then, that you see rising today. And I believe in some ways we're actually in Britain reaping what we sowed nearly 100 years ago here.
You know, one of the bright spots that we do see in Britain is that in an unprecedented level, the few evangelical organizations and churches are actually cooperating with the Jewish community there. Why do you think that Jews and Christians are coming together in Britain after all these years?
Well, I think it's a wonderful thing that's happening. I think that the real Bible-believing Christians and the Jewish people, we have a shared heritage, and that is why I believe that this is now beginning to happen, and a natural friendship is beginning to form.
What do you think the future for Judeo-Christian relations in Britain is?
Well, in Britain as a whole, I think it's something that's dying, because the Judeo-Christian culture in Europe is being taken over by secular humanism, and also radical Islam is having an influence on wanting to destroy the Judeo-Christian heritage that has existed in Europe for centuries.
Hugh, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
Well, I believe that we do need to stand with Israel and stand for Israel, because Israel is the only true democracy in the Middle East, for one thing, and I'm looking at that from a political perspective. But for the Christians, we need to come back to our Bibles, and we need to realize that the covenant that God made with Abraham 4,000 years ago is both everlasting and it's unconditional, and he will see it to its ultimate fulfillment.
Thank you, Hugh, for being on the show.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
It is heartbreaking to learn that there are over 40,000 abortions in Israel every year, many of which are due to financial concerns. The Efrat organization saves the lives of thousands of Jewish children each year by providing support to pregnant women in distress. Please help us save thousands more.
This is Jerusalem, Israel's capital city. It's an ancient and modern treasure that is beyond belief. There's a little bit of Israel in all of us. Come find the Israel in you.
Up next, Shining Light from Israel.
The question is, what are the benefits of blessing Israel? The answer, Genesis 12:3. Most of you have heard me say this before, but it is an eternal promise. I will bless those that bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. That one sentence is God's foreign policy statement concerning Israel. Let's consider Bible examples that you can find in history of people who blessed Israel. Consider the Pharaoh who blessed Joseph. When Joseph came into the land, he gave Joseph and his family the lands of Goshen. The Jewish people prospered in Israel, and the Pharaoh that blessed Joseph became the most wealthy man on the face of the earth, because when God revealed to Joseph that the plague was coming and they saved all of that food, they used that grain to buy the real estate around Egypt. Pharaoh owned Egypt. He owned the Jewish people. He owned that real estate. He was the most wealthy man on the face of the earth. I'm saying to you, whenever you start doing things of a practical nature to bless the nation of Israel and the Jewish people, God will begin to pour out miracles in your life that are very obvious and very powerful.
Anywhere else, this would be a vacation by a lake. But this is the Sea of Galilee. The wonders of Israel are beyond belief. There's a little bit of Israel in all of us. Come find the Israel in you.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
There is a great need in Israel today, whether it's Holocaust survivors, youth at risk, or new immigrants. Our vision is to build relationships, to foster reconciliation, and to reach out with God's love by responding to the social needs that come across our desk every single day. Through the projects that we do, we hope to provide a better future for the people of Israel and to reach out with hope to those who need it most.
Already for more than 30 years, the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem, is reaching out all over the land, from the north to the south, from the east to the west, to reach those people that are in need. And these people are, of course, the Jewish people who live in this land. But we've also been reaching out to the Christian Arab, to the Muslims, to the Bedouin, and to the Druze that are part of the population of Israel. The ICJ has the incredible privilege to be part in the establishment and also the ongoing expansion of the assisted living community for Holocaust survivors in Haifa. Not only find aging survivors a home, but the Christian support and involvement has touched their lives deeply and is giving them new hope.
I'm very happy when I see people who come, Christians from around the world who come to visit us. They're interested in how we live and they help us. I'm very happy when I see them. It reminds me of my youth. It does something good to my soul. It makes me very happy and I appreciate those who come. They truly deserve a thank you from the Jewish people to know that there are still good people in the world.
We've been engaged in educational programs and vocational training that enables young people, women, and minorities to get the tools that they need to have a better future and to break out of the cycle of poverty.
Do you know what does it mean to be an educated person in the Ethiopian community? It's a big professor. They saw their expectation is they can change their whole life. Here, we come here, the reality is different. You have to be educated one, to manage your family and to grow your children, to be successful, to keep the country.
I want to study, not all the time, but I want to get to the stage where I know everything. And there is no such stage.
We've been excited to reach out to the children of Israel through various projects. 2 of them were children's homes, where the kids who live in these homes have been removed from their own families for various reasons. Could be because they're orphaned, or they went through some sort of trauma, or other family difficulties. But the first home, the dormitories were in very, very bad disrepair, and we were able to remodel this home and make it a wonderful living space for the children. And in the other, the children had no place to play, and so we were able to put in a new playground for them and help them just rediscover the joys of their childhood.
You just learned about some of the projects the International Christian Embassy is carrying out here in Israel. And I want to personally invite you to partner with the Christian Embassy to bless the Jewish people like never before. We are your embassy here in Jerusalem, and may the Lord bless you greatly out of Zion.
Those who dreamed about the Jewish state, those who wrought the historical miracle and against all odds established a state, those who arrived in the homeland to their new home, those who propelled Israel forward step after step.
I have no doubt that this expanded partnership with our many Christian supporters will greatly strengthen Israel in the years ahead. And I want to thank you all for being part of that historic effort and that historic partnership. May God bless all of Israel's friends throughout the world. May God bless you.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan Elrom.
And I'm Rebecca Rand, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us next week for all of your Israel updates.
And that's it. Well done.
Definitely a different feel.
We don't have to talk for 30 seconds on this show. As soon as we start to talk, Johnny cuts us off.